Hi, I'm Cam and this is 1 Minute Murder. On Valentine's Day 1999, Julie's son snapped this photo of her mother and her friend in their room at the Cedar Lodge. This is the last photo of them taken alive. Next morning, a maintenance man knocked on their door claiming there had been a leak coming from their room that needed to be fixed immediately. Carl refused to let the man in multiple times, however his attempts to enter the room grew more and more serious. After he threatened to get the manager involved, she finally let him in to have a look. It was a simple mistake that sealed the fate of the mother and the two teenage girls. The maintenance man, later to be discovered as Carrie Stainer, bound and gagged the three women so they couldn't scream. Carol was taken to the bathroom, strangled, and then dragged to the trunk of her own rental car. He then ripped the clothes off of both girls and sexually tortured and assaulted them for hours, even forcing them to perform sexual acts on one another. Sylvania began to sob uncontrollably, ruining the fantasy that Stainer had created about the two teenage girls. This led to him strangling Sylvania as well and placing her in the trunk with Carol. He returned to the room and sexually assaulted Julie even more. After that, he took her to a point near Lake Don Pedro where he slashed her throat and threw her into a ditch. After the murders, a map showing where Julie's body was arrived at the FBI office in Modesto. Message read, "We had fun with this one." Stainer is now 59 and remains on death row in California.
This Missouri man was running a sex dungeon out of his home, and not the consensual kind. Timothy Hazlitt Jr. sexually assaulted, kidnapped, bound, and abused, and reportedly killed multiple women. He was only found out and convicted because a 22-year-old woman who he'd kidnapped from Kansas City escaped his basement and home wearing a black latex lingerie and went banging on a neighbor's door for help. She also had a dog collar around her neck and was beaten very badly. She was kept in a small makeshift room in Timothy's basement and was only able to escape when Timothy went and took his child to school. This still remains an active investigation as it only happened in October of 2022, so stay tuned for more details.
This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 PM and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.
The 13-year search for missing 17-year-old Brittanee Drexel has finally come to an end. She was last seen leaving her friend's hotel to walk back to her own on April 25, 2009 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She started the 30-minute walk down the crowded Myrtle Beach Strip, and her boyfriend became alarmed after she stopped texting him back. When the police tracked her phone, they found that it pinged 3 times, going 40 miles an hour outside of the city area and towards a swamp. This was extremely concerning because Brittanee didn't come down there with a car and she didn't know anyone who lived in this area. Just this past week, remains were found in that Georgetown area, and the police announced today that they were identified as Brittanee's through DNA. They also announced that Raymond Moody would be charged with her abduction, SA, and murder. At least now her family finally has answers and this creep can be taken off the street.
This man confessed to taking the lives of more than 300 people, and yet he was released from prison, and to this day nobody knows where he is. If you're a fan of all things interesting and horrific, follow along because that's what I make videos on. Now back to the story. Throughout the 1970s, Pedro would target very young girls who were working at markets across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, and there he would lure them away with the promises of giving them either food or money, although he would assault them and take their life. To quote him directly, "I would walk along the markets looking for a girl with a certain look on her face, a look of innocence and beauty, and then once her mother's back was turned, he would swoop in." In 1980, at the age of 33, he was arrested in Ecuador and initially pleaded guilty to taking the lives of at least 57 people, although he would ultimately confess to doing this to over 300 girls. Even though he pleads guilty, Ecuador only sentences him to 16 years in prison. The public obviously was outraged, so Ecuador changes their mind from 16 years to 25 years in prison, which isn't much better. Then on August 31st, 1994, this monster was released from prison 2 years early for, quote, good behavior. Upon his release, authorities deport him back to Colombia, and then there they declare him as being insane, so he goes to a psych ward. Then in February 1998, he's declared sane and released for less than $50 bail. Since his release in 1998, nobody knows where he is, and he's 75 years old today. This entire case is insanity. Talk about spitting in the face of all the victims' families. Although if you enjoy these videos, please do me a favor and follow me on Instagram and YouTube in case this app gets the axe.
A 13-year-old girl vanishes. The next day, her body is found in an abandoned house in an unspeakable condition. This is the extremely disturbing story of Keimani Latigue. She went missing in Ohio in March of 2025, so this just happened. Her disappearance triggered an urgent search, and the outcome was beyond tragic. Less than 24 hours later, police discovered her body in an abandoned, boarded-up house. And once again, I say all of this to spread awareness about the case because you'll never guess who did it. She was brutally attacked. She was stabbed multiple times here. She was essayed. Her were cut off. It was so violent that the crime scene investigators said that they struggled to process the scene. Now, the man arrested was her father. This is Darnell Jones. And while he had a criminal history, no one expected anything like this. He was confirmed to be the last person seen with her alive, and he was charged for her murder. But it doesn't even end there. So the community was grieving. They put all these beautiful memorial things in front of the house. But then something even more chilling happened. The house caught on fire, and nobody knows exactly how this happened. And it happened exactly 1 month after her passing. And the part that I find kind of beautiful about all of this is that, yes, the house burned down, but everything around it, the entire memorial, it remained untouched. Even the balloons, nothing was destroyed by the fire whatsoever, except for the actual physical house itself. Even the teddy bears attached to the house were still intact. And no one knows what triggered this fire. And some people think it's the energy in the house, it's just a sign because it happened 1 month after everything happened to her in that house. And the father is behind bars, but one question still haunts this case. Nobody knows why he even did it. It's so sad to see this happen to anybody, especially someone so young. It makes me so upset, and I really feel for the family. I said nothing but love. Come over here for longer videos.
This teacher, known as the camel toe teacher, was just arrested for having a relationship with a 16-year-old student. The teen's father was also arrested for knowing about the relationship and failing to report it to authorities. This woman's name is Haley Clifton Carmack. They arrested her charged with SA of a student, 4th-degree endangerment of a child, and 2nd-degree SA. She was arrested in Garden Ridge, so she's about to be extradited back to Missouri. She was listed as a math teacher in Lackey High School in Lackey, Missouri. They also investigated the text messages between her and the student as well. There were a lot of messages. It's more than likely she knew she was in hot water and left the state for Texas. Police got a tip about her leaving to Texas, so that's how they found her. This happened a while ago too, back in January. I'm not sure what kind of sentencing she'll get. My guess, maybe like 5 or 10 years. But a lot of people are questioning why the father was arrested, but he knew what was going on. Many are saying he's probably just proud of the son and brushed it off. And others are questioning how she got the nickname Camel Toe Teacher. Let me know what you guys think about this story.
This is Kids Who Kill, Part 9. Anne McGuire was a Spanish teacher at Corpus Christi Catholic College in Leeds, England, when in 2014 she was stabbed to death by her 15-year-old student. 61-year-old Anne had worked at the school for 40 years and was due to retire in just 5 months. But on April 28, 2014, the unthinkable happened. In her Spanish class was 15-year-old William Cornick. He reportedly grew up in a loving environment. His former teacher said he was polite, and his classmates said he was really smart and would never cause any trouble. But after falling sick in 2010 and being diagnosed with diabetes, his personality changed. In 2013, he became upset that he couldn't join the military due to his diagnosis, which was reportedly his dream. At one point, Anne gave him detention after he failed to do his homework. He wanted to drop Spanish class, but Anne wouldn't let him, which really angered him. He formed a grudge and began planning to murder Anne. On Christmas of 2013, he sent a message to a friend over Facebook Messenger where he talked about brutally murdering her. William also sent out a group message to his friends asking them to kill her for him for 10 pounds sterlings, which is roughly $1 US. On April 28, 2014, halfway through Anne's Spanish lesson, William walked up to her in front of his entire class and stabbed her 7 times in the back and neck with an 8-inch knife. He then chased her into the hallway where another teacher saw what was going on and pushed her into a different room, holding the door shut as William tried to push his way in. Sadly, not long after this, Anne died from her injuries. When William couldn't get into the room, he went back to his Spanish class with his terrified peers and opened a bottle of whiskey that he had brought to celebrate killing his teacher. Following this, he was arrested and admitted that just 4 days before the murder, he actually told a psychiatrist that he was planning to kill his Spanish teacher. William also admitted that he had planned to kill 2 other teachers that day, with one of them being pregnant. During his trial, William was evaluated by psychiatrists who said he possessed a, quote, gross lack of empathy for his victim and a degree of callousness rarely seen in clinical practice, end quote. They determined that the risk of grave homicidal violence in the future was high, and with that, William was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. In 2015, he tried to appeal his conviction, but lost. William has never shown any remorse for what he did and stated, quote, I know the family would be pissed off, but in my eyes, everything I've done is fine and dandy, end quote.
So there is this map that's circulating, it's going viral, and it's showing some pretty morbid data. Now, the thing that gives this credibility is that this is connected to a special interest project coming out of the FBI where they think there could be upwards of 850 victims of homicide connected to a ring of serial killers who are truck drivers. And there are all these stats that they're citing, talking about 44% of truck drivers are reporting that they are clinically depressed. And you gotta think about it, these are transient people who travel some of the most desolate roads in America, and it is very, very hard to track a transient serial killer. They have almost no connection to any of the places where they hypothetically kill, so local jurisdiction can't really pinpoint who they are.
I shot my son's abuser 5 times in the middle of the trial for something you would never imagine. I'm Ellie Nesler, and this is my story. It all happened in Sacramento, California when my 6-year-old son, Willie Nesler, began attending a Bible camp. I thought it would be a safe place for him, but it turned out to be the complete opposite. There, he met Daniel Driver, one of the camp instructors. After gaining his trust, Daniel abused him in terrible ways and threatened him to stay silent. My son kept it a secret for over a year out of fear. Eventually, he couldn't hold it in any longer and told us everything. We later found out Daniel had hurt 4 other children at the camp. My son had to testify, but he was so scared and stressed that it was painful to watch. I reached my breaking point. During a break in the trial, I took the gun from my bag, and without hesitation, I looked him in the eyes and ended his life. I was sentenced to 10 years, but at least that creep will never harm another child. Do you think I deserved that sentence? Follow us for more cases.
This is the story of the accidental death of Tamla Horsford, and I will cover this in several parts on here, but if you want the full story in one part, go listen to the latest episode of my podcast. Tamla was born in the Caribbean where she lived with her family until they moved to the Bronx in 1989.
Eventually, she met her husband, Leander, and became a stepmom to his daughter. Together, the couple had 5 children, and eventually they moved to Cumming, Georgia for Leander's job. In 2018, Tamla was 40 years old, and her kids ranged in age from 4 to 14, and she loved being involved with them, going to all their football games and participating in their schools. We can't talk about this case without talking about the fact that Tamla was a Black woman living in an area of Georgia that was predominantly white. Even in 2018, Forsyth County was very white, with just a 4% Black population. So several of Tamla's friends, many of who she met through her kids, they were parents to her kids' friends, were white. On November 3rd, 2018, 46-year-old Jean Myers had a birthday party, slumber party at her house where she had several friends over. The friends were drinking, playing games, and watching the LSU-Alabama football game. Tamla arrived at the party around 8:30 p.m. after getting her kids and husband ready for bed for the night and even making them a casserole that they would have the next morning. At around 10:30 p.m., Tamla called her husband to check in with him, saying that she was having an amazing time at the slumber party. At around 1 a.m., the party was starting to die down and several people went off to bed. But Tamla wasn't ready to go to bed yet, and she stayed up with another woman named Bridget Fuller. At 1:47 a.m., Bridget Fuller's husband came and picked her up, as you can see from these front door opened and closed notifications. 2 minutes later, at 1:49 a.m., the back door was opened, and it was known that Tamla had gone outside to smoke several times during the night using the back door. The back door was closed at 1:50 a.m. and then opened again at 1:57 a.m., but never closed. The next morning, Jean Myers' aunt, Madeline Lombardi, woke up and went to make herself a cup of coffee when she noticed outside Tamla laying face down in the grass. But instead of running out to check on her, she dropped to her knees and said a prayer, and then went upstairs to get Jean and her boyfriend. Jean's boyfriend was Jose Barrera, a 27-year-old who had ended up staying for the party and slept over. Finally, Jean and Jose went outside to see if Tamla was okay, and that's when they noticed that she was stiff and apparently not breathing. They called 911, and this is when this case just gets incredibly confusing. And that's where I'll pick up in part 2.
How is it possible to vanish into thin air while physically talking to another person? This is the strange disappearance of Brandon Swanson. On May 13, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon attended a couple of parties to celebrate completing his very first year of college at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby, Minnesota. The first party Brandon attended was in Lind, which is about 7 miles from Marshall, Minnesota, where he lived. There, he chatted with friends, had a beer or two, and decided to leave around 10:30 to 11:30 p.m. Friends at this party claimed that Brandon did not seem intoxicated and was very clear-headed. Brandon then went to a party in Canby, which is about 30 miles away from Lind and Marshall. There, he had 1 shot of whiskey and at around midnight decided it was time to go home. And again, his friends stated that at this party, he still did not seem intoxicated. Brandon normally took Highway 68 home. It was a straight shot and he had driven it many times. But on this night, for whatever reason, he decided to take a back road home. At around 1:15 a.m., Brandon drove his Chevrolet Lumina into a ditch and was unable to get out. 30 minutes later, he called his parents asking them to come and pick him up, giving them very specific directions of where exactly he was at and that he was near Lind. His parents, Annette and Brian, stayed on the phone with him until they got to where Brandon said he was, but they couldn't see him. They both agreed to flash their headlights as a signal, but they still couldn't see each other. This was odd as this particular area is super flat and would be easy to see each other. At 2:17 a.m., Brandon, being frustrated that they couldn't find him, tells his parents that he sees Lind's city lights and is just going to walk there to grab a friend. He tells them that he's going to cut through fields to make the walk shorter and is actively describing what he sees, a couple of fences, that he could hear running water, and that he's walking on a gravel road. At around 3:10 a.m., 47 minutes into the phone call with his parents, Brandon yells, "Oh shit," and the call ends. His parents repeatedly try calling him back, but he never answers. They search along Highway 68, but find no trace of him. At 6:30 the next morning, they report Brandon missing to the police, in which they said it wasn't unusual for a young man Brandon's age to stay out all night, and that he, quote, had a right to be missing, end quote. Eventually, police do start looking for him and pull up his cell phone records. Through pings, they found Brandon was actually near Porter when he called his parents, not Lind like he said, which is about 25 miles away. Upon further investigation, police found Brennan's car about 1.5 miles from Taunton. It was on a gravel road, and because of that, there were no footprints indicating which way Brandon went. Extensive ground and air searches were conducted, but absolutely no trace of Brandon was found. Bloodhounds were brought in and tracked his scent down Country Road 16 onto an abandoned driveway of a farm next to Yellow Medicine River and at one point in the river but getting back out and then leading to a drainage point. There his scent ends. The river was searched for 30 days but turned up absolutely nothing. What Brandon saw that night that made him yell, "Oh shit," remains a mystery. It has now been 13 years and Brandon's disappearance remains unsolved. To this day, Brandon's parents leave their light on in hopes one day he will come back home. Kids Who Kill Part 3. August 10th, 2012 started out as a normal day for 15-year-old Zachary Davis. To close out the night, Zachary went to the movies with his mom Melanie and his older brother Josh. They saw the movie The Campaign, and when it was over, they went back to their home in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Melanie went to bed at around 9 p.m., while Zachary did something much more sinister. He packed a bag with clothes, notebooks, a toothbrush, gloves and a ski mask, and a claw hammer. He then retrieved a sledgehammer from the garage, crept into his mom's room, and bludgeoned her to death over 20 times while his brother Josh slept. He then closed and locked his mom's door before dousing the family's game room with whiskey and gasoline and setting it on fire, attempting to burn his brother alive. Zachary then fled the house, but because he didn't shut the door to the game room, the fire didn't spread fast enough, which tripped the fire alarms and woke Josh. After breaking down his mom's door, he found her lifeless body and called the police. 5 hours later, Zachary was found walking down a road in bloody clothes and was arrested. Upon being arrested, he told authorities, quote, "I didn't feel anything when I killed her," end quote. During the investigation, it was brought to light that when Zachary was 9 years old, his father died from ALS. After this, he unsurprisingly became severely depressed and was hospitalized for psychiatric treatment. There, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and claimed that he heard voices. Despite the severity of his condition, his mom discontinued his treatments very early on. Zachary told investigators that he heard his dad's voice, which told him to kill his mom that day. When asked why he did this, he said, quote, "She wasn't taking care of my family," end quote. In one of Zachary's journals, police found an entry dated the day Zachary killed his mom that stated he was raped by his brother Josh that day, and that he told his mom, but she didn't do anything about it. Josh denied this, and the claims were thoroughly investigated by the Department of Children's Services, who found no evidence to back these claims up. Investigators asked Zachary if he would change anything if he can go back in time, and Zachary stated, quote, "I would probably kill Josh with a sledgehammer too," end quote. Showing no remorse, Zachary was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, plus another 20 years for the attempted murder of his brother. This is a clip from an interview Zachary had with Dr. Phil. Viewer discretion is advised.
Did you kill your mother?
Yeah.
You killed your mother. Why that day?
I just thought it was a good time.
Did she make a noise?
I could just hear the hammer hitting her head.
And what did it sound like?
It was this wet, thumping sound.
Yeah. How long before you hit her the second time?
Just a few seconds.
Did you think she was already dead?
She woke up and she started seizing up.
This man was making his way to his morning prayers when he was targeted and fatally beaten by two racists. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Mian Armed. Today's case takes place in Rotherham, South Yorkshire in 2015. Mian is 81 years old and happily retired. He loved to spend time with his wife, his children and his 12 grandchildren. He was a very loving and family-oriented man. People who knew him would describe him as kind, gentle, well-respected, well-mannered and someone who always had a smile on his face. In the early hours of the 10th of August 2015, it was between 3 and 3:30 a.m, Mian had left the house and was walking to his local mosque so that he could attend morning prayers. Of course, he was dressed in his traditional clothing for this. It was while on this walk that Mian would be followed by a group of men, two of these men being 30-year-old Dale Jones and Damien Hunt. Dale and Damien had spent the whole previous night and most of that day drinking alcohol and abusing drugs. Dale specifically had took it a step further. That day, the day before Mian is being followed to the mosque, Dale had got into an argument with his girlfriend's son's dad and threatened to kill him. After this, he stormed out of the house and seemingly just went on a bender. Mere minutes before seeing Mian, Dale and Damien were in a taxi that was being drove by an Asian man, and for absolutely no reason, they began to verbally abuse and call this man disgusting racial slurs. I believe that they were kicked out of this taxi, and then it's only a couple of minutes later that they had spotted Mian dressed in his traditional clothing walking to the mosque to attend his morning prayers, and they began to follow him. Dale and Damien began verbally abusing, shouting at Mian, calling him racial slurs, and Mian was just completely brushing it off, completely ignoring them. It was likely that this reaction from Mian further angered Dale and Damien because they weren't getting the kick out of being cruel that they had wanted. This is when they made the completely false assumption based off of nothing that Mian was a groomer, that he was a paedophile, and they used this reason, this false assumption, as a good enough reason to launch an attack on Mian, a man who was 51 years older than them. Damien would push Mian to the floor and punched him so hard in the face that his dentures broke. Dale continued the assault, kicking Mian in the face several times with so much force that he had actually left an imprint of his trainer on Mian's face. After they were satisfied that they had beaten Mian enough, Dale and Damien fled. They washed off their bloody clothing and then went on about their day trying to establish alibis. Damien decided to go fishing. At around 5:25 a.m, a person who was out walking found Mian, who was lay in agony on some grass, and it was clear from just looking at him that he had been the victim of a ferocious attack. This person then managed to flag down a passing police car, and Mian was rushed to the hospital. Here it was found that Mian had sustained fractured eye sockets, a broken nose, a broken jaw, and had brain damage. He would sadly pass away 11 days later, succumbing to his injuries. Police were able to track down and find their suspects due to key evidence. Mian's broken dentures had been recovered and they had blood on them. From this blood, they were able to extract a DNA profile, which led police to Damien Hunt. CCTV that they were able to recover from around the area of the attack and around the time of the attack helped police narrow down who else was in the area at that time, and this is how they linked Dale Jones. Some other men were arrested too, but they were later released without charge. Like I say, it was a group of men that had followed Mian, but I guess it was found through evidence that it was only these two that participated in the assault which led to Mian's death. During questioning, Damien tried to deflect any and all blame. When asked about his bloody knuckles, he said that he had sustained the bloody knuckles after he had punched a lamppost. However, with the evidence stacking up against him, Damien eventually cracked. He admitted that he did punch Mian, but apparently it was accidental. He had only punched Mian after he was trying to get Dale off of him. That was his story anyway. During questioning, Dale would only reply no comment to anything that he was asked. At Sheffield Crown Court in February 2016, Dale Jones was found guilty of murder and was handed a life sentence with a minimum of 32 years to serve. Damien Hunt was found guilty of manslaughter. He was cleared of murder and was handed a 14-year sentence.